WWE's Royal Rumble is on the horizon, and fans will no doubt be getting excited about not just the two Battle Royals on offer, but also the other big matches that fill out one of the company's biggest and most anticipated shows of the year. Yet despite being one of the biggest and most anticipated shows of the year, WWE haven't been shy about offering fans some decidedly strange matches at Rumbles past. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 very strange Royal Rumble pay-per-view matches. Join us. Number 10, Chyna vs. Ivory in 2001. The 2001 Royal Rumble pay-per-view is best remembered for Steve Austin's record-setting third Rumble match victory, a belter of an Intercontinental title ladder match between Chris Jericho and Benoit, and the surprise Rumble appearance of future WWE Hall of Famer Drew Carey. It was overall a very good event, with one notable bad spot. In a mid-card match, Chyna challenged Right to Censor member Ivory for the Women's Championship. The ninth wonder of the world was heading into the contest with a dodgy neck after being on the receiving end of an RTC spike piledriver. Having been mocked incessantly in the weeks after, Chyna went into the match looking to flatten the champ and started off by bumping Ivory all over the shop. It was totally one-sided in favor of the challenger when, just a couple of minutes in, she hit a very weak handspring back elbow into the corner and collapsed to the mat. Ivory then simply placed a hand on her prone opponent and retained the gold. The match itself was really a whole load of nothing, but the finish and super duper serious post-match angle were awful and completely unbelievable. Number 9, the Bushwackers versus the Beverly Brothers in 1992. The 1992 Royal Rumble pay-per-view is generally considered one of the best in the illustrious history of the event, with Roddy Piper's Intercontinental triumph and Ric Flair's world title win in the eponymous match standing out as particular highlights. The rest of the card, though, was a tale of 3 tag matches. The New Foundation's victory over the Orient Express was entertaining, the Natural Disasters versus the Legion of Doom wasn't great, but the Bushwackers against the Beverly Brothers was a crime against sports entertainment. Seriously, this was 15 minutes that felt like it lasted 15 years and was an embarrassment to any self-respecting wrestling fan, of which I admit there are probably few. I mean, the Bushwackers had an atrocious match against the Rougeaus 2 years prior, but they somehow managed to have an even worse one that at times resembled bad community theatre against the Beverlys. The post-match antics with Jameson winding up for a big punch only to kick the genius in the shins after Butch and Luke had lost fair and square mind put an especially lame bow on this rotten snooze fest. Number 8, the Mini SixMan Tag in 1998. The 1997 Royal Rumble pay-per-view had a large lucha libre presence as WWE had entered into a working arrangement with Mexican promotion AAA and felt like some talent from south of the border would be welcomed on a show that could potentially have a large Hispanic contingent in attendance. 3 AAA dark matches, 1 on the main card, and several luchadors in the Rumble itself was the result, and it's fair to say that the experiment didn't exactly get over as anyone had hoped. A year later, WWE went in a different direction and booked a 6-man featuring Mexican talent of the Mini variety. The babyface team of Nova, no, not that one, Mosaic and Max Mini took on Battalion, El Torito, and Tarantula in a match where Sonny would act as the special guest referee. Honestly, I'm pretty sure that this was just an excuse to get Tammy Sitch out there in short shorts, but the match itself was fairly spectacular in parts, even if the incessant arm drags and dives did become repetitive before long. The babyface-less trio picked up the win after Sonny got involved and made a complete hash of her big spot at the end. Hey, if nothing else, at least Jerry Lawler put his big book of little people jokes to good use on commentary, eh? Number 7, The Undertaker vs. Yokozuna in 1994. The Undertaker and Yokozuna were 2 big men who could really work and had some pretty darn decent matches against one another, truth be told. This was not one of them. Don't get me wrong, this casket match outing from the 1994 Royal Rumble pay-per-view started off decently enough and actually looked as though it might turn out to be rather good. But just as it appeared that the dead man had things sewn up, the Goon Squad arrived. First Crush, then the Great Kabuki of all people, then Tenryu of all people, then Bam Bam Bigelow, then Jeff Jarrett, then Adam Bomb, then the Head Shrinkers, and then Diesel. They all ran in and tried to put Taker in the casket as Paul Bearer used the power of the urn to inspire his man. But then Bearer got taken out and had the urn, which began to leak green smoke, stolen from him, which was finally enough to put the dead man down. But wait, there's more! Because then The Undertaker cut a promo from inside the casket before his spirit rose from it and ascended to the heavens. Genuinely jealous of The Undertaker here because I wish I was dead after watching all that. Number 6, the Ascension versus the New Age Outlaws in 2015. At the 1998 Royal Rumble, troublemaking up-and-comers, the New Age Outlaws defended their tag straps against the Legion of Doom. 17 years later, Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg were defending the honor of the LOD against the Ascension. Isn't life beautiful? The 2015 Royal Rumble pay-per-view is one of the most notoriously naff in WWE history, with an ending that ranks right up there in worst of all time category. It's fair to say the show didn't get off to a rocking start with this tag match, which really was the end of the road for the Outlaws as a tag team. By rights, Connor and Victor should have just squashed the living daylights out of them in a dominant display that showed fans that they were a serious force to be reckoned with, if we actually have to book the match in the first place, that is. However, what we got was just a standard, decidedly poor 5-minute match that proved Mr. Ass and the DOGG as a team were well past their sell-by date. A curious match in general, but a really curious way to kick off a major show. Number 5, JBL versus the Boogeyman in 2006. I mean, when you have a bloke who eats worms and smashes clocks over his head, it's kind of strange by default, no? Heading into the 2006 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, the Boogeyman had stalked JBL and targeted his image consultant, Jillian Hall, shoving worms into her undies and biting that growth off her face. When they finally met in the ring, JBL did the chivalrous thing by throwing Jillian right at the nutter before launching a sneak attack. Because Marty Wright was notoriously awful as an in-ring performer, the match itself was JBL doing his best to work around his incredibly limited dance partner, peppering him with stiff shots and then missing a charge, which allowed Boogie to hit a pump handle slam and pin him with one hand. Now, bear in mind, JBL had been WWE champion and title contender less than a year prior, and had led the charge for SmackDown against Raw at Survivor Series. And yet, here he was getting squashed and pinned by this insect-eating freak show in under 2 minutes. A short and basic match by necessity, it's still jarring to see a future Hall of Famer and someone as dominant as JBL get dispatched of with such ease. Number 4, Sable vs. Luna in 1999. God, the 1999 Rumble pay-per-view was a slog, wasn't it? WWE may have been red hot at the time, but this was a big misfire full of uninspired wrestling and dodgy booking. Didn't especially enjoy watching Mick Foley get CTE'd in front of his kids either, to be honest with you. Worst match of the night honours, however, went to Sable's Women's Championship defense against Luna in a strap match. The match itself almost didn't happen, as Sable's then husband Mark Merrow complained that his wife wasn't trained for the gimmick and they wouldn't have enough time to practice for it since the future Playboy cover girl was being booked here, there and everywhere, though they ultimately came to an agreement. WWE ran an angle on the pre-Rumble edition of Sunday Night Heat with Luna attacking Sable and hitting her with a backbreaker, the insinuation being that the champ would simply forfeit the title. Sadly, we weren't so lucky. The two ladies had their match, such as it was, which ended when a fan from the crowd, later revealed to be Tori, ran in and punched Luna in the mouth, allowing Sable to retain. Number 3, Brodus Clay vs. Drew McIntyre in 2012. In 2020, Drew McIntyre wrote his name in the history books by winning the Royal Rumble match. Unfortunately, the Scottish Warrior's big moment came not in front of a sold-out stadium, but in front of a sanitized, practically empty performance center due to the COVID-19 pandemic. That must have been a kick in the teeth for Drew, who had worked so hard to get to that point, but he could take solace in the fact that his future certainly looked a lot brighter than it did 8 years prior. Because at the 2012 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, McIntyre was not booked to win the Rumble. Hell, he wasn't even booked in the match. Nope, our man was put in an unadvertised bonus match after begging SmackDown General Manager Teddy Long for a spot on the card. His opponent was Brodus Clay, who essentially shrugged off what little offense McIntyre could muster before hitting his comeback and dispatching Drew with ease in just over a minute. And some people thought 3MB was his rock bottom moment. Number 2, The Undertaker vs. Reich in 2005. The Undertaker was just forgetting that abomination of a casket match with Yokozuna at the 94 Rumble when WWE booked him in another with the far less talented Reich. The two men had been feuding for months, with Taker having already beaten him at Survivor Series, but it was deemed that the rivalry must continue because reasons, I'm sure. Prior to the bout, Reich and Snitsky continued their terrifying bromance in another bizarre backstage segment. The story of the match was that Reich was scared of caskets. Weird, I'm scared by Reich matches, and he freaked out whenever he was near it. Inevitably, the baby-punting foot fetishist ran in to help his new pal, which led to Snitsky's recent rival Kane popping out of the casket to even the odds. The match chugged along from there, with such highlights as Reich forgetting how to apply a sleeper hold and then forgetting the rules of the match as he went for a pin. Inevitably, the Phenom made his usual comeback and mercifully ended the amateurish outing after a tombstone piledriver. The original plan for this was for a tag match between the Brothers of Destruction and Reich and Snitsky at WrestleMania 21, but then this happened and, well, plans mercifully changed. Number 1, Bray Wyatt vs LA Knight in 2023. Anticipation was high for Bray Wyatt's first televised match since his loss to Randy Orton in that truly balmy bout at Night 2 of WrestleMania 37. The Eater of Worlds had returned to the company following an 18-month absence, and fans were curious to see what he could do with the up-and-coming LA Knight in their pitch black match at the 2023 Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Sadly, what could have been a fun concept did not translate well in practice, but boy did it give me a hankering for one particular brand of energy drink. So the basic gimmick was that the lights were turned down and they wrestled with a black light, accentuating their glow-in-the-dark ring gear and paint. Oh, and that big Mountain Dew logo in the middle of the ring, of course, because this match was little more than a prolonged advertisement for one of WWE's show sponsors. They could have maybe overcome this with a good match, but sadly that was not to be. It was short and bad, followed by a post-match angle that ended with Uncle Howdy hitting or almost hitting a flying elbow off a bit of the set, which triggered a bunch of pyrotechnics as the Firefly Funhouse creatures looked on. Based on this, I'm assuming that drinking pitch black Mountain Dew has the same effect as ingesting a bucket full of magic mushrooms. And I would know.